Hi, my name is Father Brian Frain. I work in SJU, which is the Alliance for Catholic Education at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. I'm also a doctoral student at the University of Rochester, and I'm getting my doctorate in education and teaching and curriculum. I'm particularly interested in character education in schools, and particularly in Jesuit schools. My dissertation is on trying to measure the religious care that we provide students. The title of my doctoral dissertation is called Cura Personalis, the religious care of non-Catholic students in Jesuit high schools. Cura Personalis is a Latin phrase meaning care of the entire person. That is, the care of the body, the mind, and the spirit. It's our hope that we help to develop within each human being a care that's spiritual, that's intellectual, and that's physically helpful for their fullest human development. Recently, religious education has become an important consideration at Jesuit schools. There's an increasing number of students who want to attend these high schools, and yet more of them are coming from a non-Catholic religious identity or spiritual identity. And yet, the Catholic school environment that they would be attending is significantly different than they are accustomed. For example, they might find statues in their hallways. They're definitely going to receive daily religion class instruction with a Catholic lens. They might find themselves praying before each of their 8 periods of class, sitting through guided prayer meditations, and occasionally participating in school masses. Their surroundings are definitely going to be different than their public school or their private school if they had not attended a Catholic school. There'll be discussions about saints. There'll be crucifixes in each classroom. Some schools may even have a church attached to their school. As a Jesuit educator, intersection between the emerging adolescent spiritual identity and the formation program at their Jesuit preparatory school. The site I chose was in the Mid-Atlantic metropolitan area, and I completed my data collection during the fall and winter of 2014. 20 students, grades 9 through 12, with 5 adult participants, described and interpreted the non-Catholic student experience in small focus groups that gave them a chance to share fully what it was like. The student pool was selected from a list generated from an admissions department report and suggestions from the faculty participants who recognized ideal students that could richly describe the situation from a non-Catholic hermeneutic lens. In doing this, students met and shared their personal attitudes and suggested some improvements to the current religious education program. I initially saw my study as an action research dissertation because I pulled students from class and I gave them a share in the work that I was doing. And it was also a learning experience, something that they had never done before. They learned more about themselves, they learned more about others, and they had hoped that they could do it again. They wanted to see a change in their religious education program, and that was the purpose for this dissertation. My conceptual framework for understanding their responses was Robert Jackson's interpretivist framework for my ethnographic fieldwork. This assists a researcher not only to study the subject's linguistic use of dense terms like religion and spirituality, but also one's own use of religion, how they represent religion or spirituality, how they interpret it for themselves, how they've reflected on it, and whether it's edified them or not. For my data analysis, I relied on grounded theory, which was devised and advocated by Glaser and Strauss in 1967. Now, educational researchers like Kathy Charmis use this inductive analytic framework to break down transcripts into data chunks, to reorder them, reconstruct them based on thematic units. The central focus for my research was, who are these students and how are they experiencing their school's religious formation? 4 sub-questions to help me answer that larger question was, what do they like? Have they ever felt uncomfortable in their religious formation program? Have they ever witnessed religious bullying or discrimination? And what changes would they recommend for the future? The first part was to really get to know them better, focusing on their spiritual lives. And I did notice that there was a difference. Exactly 10 of the 20 students had a moored spirituality. In other words, their spiritual identity was moored to a religious group of people that they could identify, while 10 of the students had an unmoored spiritual identity, meaning that they really didn't seem connected to any religious community, but did their search for their spiritual identity on their own. A number of strategies were evident in how they went about the development of their own spiritual lives. First of all, some really felt at home and at peace with their spirituality. Others adopted more than one spirituality. For example, one boy mentioned that he was both an agnostic and a Baptist. Some students used terms in various ways. For example, the use of the word agnostic for one boy meant that his faith life was changing, therefore he called himself an agnostic. Others were trying on different spiritual identities. Some were trying on a different religious background than they were raised in. For example, one student who was raised a Presbyterian then went to different religious church services and found himself most attracted to the Universalist Unitarian Church. Some resisted any labels. They didn't want to be called Christian. They didn't want to be called believers. They just wanted to be able to do their own thing. And finally, there were 2 that mentioned that they were neutral observers, meaning that since they had no religious upbringing or background, they could look at the world more objectively. In order to study their spiritual formation, I broke it down into 4 sections: their religion classes, their liturgies, their retreats, and their service projects. An example of a religion curriculum would be a 9th grade world religions and then studying Old Testament law. A 10th grade curriculum might be studying the New Testament with sacraments. 11th grade might study church history and ethics. And then in 12th grade you could have Ignatian spirituality, systematic theology, mindfulness classes. Finally, adults who are administrators, diversity directors, religious studies teachers, deans, coaches are all excellent examples of people who know more about the religion curriculum and how it affects students around them. So what did I find through all my data collection that I found through my focus groups? Surprisingly, for me at least, students genuinely really like their religious studies classes that they had this year. Students also were able to demonstrate religious literacy, and their attitude generally changed for the positive in terms of how they liked and approached religion classes. Unfortunately, students admitted that there is anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish comments and actions in their school. Furthermore, they notice some discomfort that they have during Mass, especially at the reception of the Eucharist. Although students are invited to cross their arms and walk up to the aisle for a blessing from the Eucharistic minister, many of them decide to sit in the pew, which makes them feel vulnerable and exposed. Finally, their service projects are best and appreciated when they're completed in their own home family communities rather than those that they participate in as a school. My action plan made only 2 recommendations. First of all, I asked the administration to hold religious diversity training in 2 areas. First, creating a safe environment for Jewish students to combat anti-Semitism, and secondly, to create a safe environment for Muslim students to combat anti-Muslim sentiments that they learn both in the media and in the general public. Secondly, I suggested occasionally holding worship services on holy days that were not masses but were liturgies of the Word or general worship and music liturgies. If students come to a Catholic school, like a Jesuit preparatory school, educational researchers will need to continue to learn what's happening to them from their angle. I hope this dissertation has done something to contribute to that research. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at bfrain@sju.edu. Thank you for listening to my presentation.